Hello, everyone. This is Doug Camplejohn, and in this week's episode of Revenue Renegades, I'm very excited to welcome the CEO and founder of Crew AI, Joe Moura. Joe, welcome to the show.
Hey there, thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here and to talk about everything, including agents. This is going to be a fun one, but thank you so much for having me.
I, as a fellow entrepreneur, love founding stories. So I always like to kick off with that. You were at Clearbit before. You have a deep engineering background. What made you decide to take the crazy leap and start your own company and start Crew AI?
Yeah, I gotta say, I'm definitely an engineer by trade. Have been doing engineering for I want to say 20 years by now. So it has been a lot of ups and downs, a lot of kind of like horror stories to tell. But I think throughout the years, I always has been someone that has been very curious and like to learn new things. So what happened is I was in Clearbit for 5 years up to the acquisition by HubSpot. And that was right around the time where kind of like ChatGPT really took off, right?
Mhm.
And everyone started to talk about it. It was early days, like no one was doing RAG or anything like that just yet. But we start to experiment with that, and we start to do some RAG pipelines, and we start to do some kind of like more, let's say, advanced embedding techniques. And all that was so enlightening in some senses that I got drowned to this idea of AI agents. So I started to build AI agents on the side, and I was having a lot of fun. I remember it was my wife and my our anniversary, and my wife hates when I bring computers for things like that, but I just had to. There's no way around it. So I remember that I would wake up early in the day while she was still asleep and spend some time just hacking my way into these agents and getting them to do the things that I want them to do. And turns out that they worked so well once that I spent some time perfecting them that I got hooked. I was like, all right, I need to do more agents. So that's how like the open source framework came to be. But the actual company was an organic kind of like evolution of that, where I noticed that big companies, like I remember going into a meetup here in the Bay Area, and someone from Oracle would approach me and say like, "Hey, we're actually using Cray in production. Can you help us?" And that was a big aha moment for me. I was like, "Well, all right. Like, if there's people using this in production, and these companies are kind of like Oracle, I this is not only an open source project. I need to do something bigger in order to support some of these companies." So that was the natural progression on making this a company. And for me, making the jump was a no brainer. Honestly, like feels like a once in a lifetime period within the technology and a once in a lifetime opportunity for people building agents out there.
That's great. Now, like the folks listening to this podcast, I'm sure are all different ranges of technical expertise. But I think there's still, even most technical folks, there's still a lot of confusion about what isn't an agent. Could you basically can you give us your definition?
Yeah, sure. In the end of the day, for me, agents needs to have agency. What I mean by that is there needs to be an element of the AI controlling the flow of the application. Because if you think about like more traditional automation, right, or traditional code, where everything is very strongly typed, where you know the data coming in, you know the transformations happening, you know the data going out. Now you have LLMs where you can have do ad hoc LLM calls to these APIs, and they're going to generate content, and that's amazing. And some people are calling that agentic, like when you do a graph automation and you have an LLM call in there. But that's not. That's kind of like a agent watching. But where things really get interesting is where you're letting the models sometimes dictate the flow of the application. So what happens next is not something that is predefined by logic, but is predefined by the AI in runtime. So my definition of agents is that it requires agency.
I love that definition. So who are like we don't have to name names, but obviously there are Mr. Benioff has obviously gone deep into the agent language. I wouldn't be surprised if he rebrands the company the way this is going. He's launched Agent Force, Agent Exchange, etc. Obviously Dharmesh at HubSpot is doing a lot with agent.ai and trying to build a kind of, as he calls it, a LinkedIn for agents. You know, what is your sense of the things that agents are having or are going to have the most impact on first?
Yeah, I gotta say, one, I think it's very clear to everyone, and you can see this marketers people out there like Benioff and Dharmesh and even Jensen himself speaking on
Mhm.
stage how this is gonna be $1 trillion industry. So if anything, that means a couple things. One, no one's gonna just leave it for us to take it all. So even though I would love that, everyone's gonna have their own spin-off agents out there. Two, there's not gonna be one winner takes all in general,
Mhm.
but there's gonna be someone that's gonna win big. And I think right now, Korea is probably the number one in terms of positioning to win big on that platform, kind of like play for AI agents. Now, I can see Agent Force in other companies like ServiceNow and SAP have their own agents within their ecosystems that are super helpful when they interact with a bunch of things in there. And the role that we are taking here is more of a universal approach where we would like our agents to talk with Salesforce agents, to talk with ServiceNow agents, to talk with SAP agents, and being able to kind of like exchange information and collaborate together through that. Now, I'm looking forward to see some of the new like Gartner researchers that are coming out in the next few weeks and months because they have spent a lot of time talking with us and other companies out there trying to understand and kind of like educate the executives out there on the market.
Mhm.
But yeah, I feel there's a few companies that are nailing it and a few others that are struggling with it.
So how do you differentiate your approach that say maybe versus what Salesforce is doing?
Yeah, I mean, if you look like, let's talk about Salesforce specifically, right? What Salesforce is doing is agents that run within their ecosystem, and even within their ecosystems is still limited. Like a lot of the acquisitions that HubSpot did throughout the years, like the agents cannot interact with that. So we're talking about only their core products, and there's benefits from that because that means that they're kind of like bulletproofing their agents from like being replaced with something else. But there is also downsides. I think a lot of the magic, the power of these AI agents really come true when they go beyond those borders and they're talking with other apps and other agents and other applications. So I think like they might be shooting themselves in the foot in some sense if they keep focusing too much on that and they don't change it in a way that can now go out more in the open. So that's the one thing that I would say that I'm looking from the Salesforce perspective. Now, the way that Crew AI position themselves is the completely opposite. We like to call ourselves a universal enterprise suite. So what that means is as you deploy these agents and if you have gone through this phase of discovery and now you understand that you're going to be an agentic native company
Mhm.
and that you're going to have hundreds if not thousands of agents running in your company 3 years from now, you understand that you won't be able to have like open source code is not going to take you there. You're going to have a lot of legacy apps if you go that way. So I think people are now trying to understand like, all right, what is this suite here of tools that I need to orchestrate not only the agents and not only the traces, but also authentication, fingerprinting, scoping, governance, and everything along those lines. So what we're doing is a very holistic platform play where we're looking into entire stack and how we can help these customers crack the entire stack with us.
Yeah, I've also always thought about this as kind of a global versus a local maximum, and
Yeah.
I think that what I see a lot of there's obviously a tremendous amount of energy being deployed, a lot of calories being spent about thinking about agent models. But if it is, as you said, this local maximum that works only within your ecosystem in an interesting way, and you almost think about this as hiring a digital worker, it's like saying that's a pool of workers that are not available to me, right? So,
Yeah.
I think that ultimately having this kind of, universal language where these can work in a very broad way seems to make a lot more sense to me.
Yeah, and I mean, to be honest, we are working directly with these teams. Like we're talking with ServiceNow, we're talking with Agentforce, we're talking with SAP, trying to figure out like how we do this interoperability with agents and how we make sure that the customers got a value. Because in the end of the day, Doug, customers don't really care. They
Yeah.
want a value. They want a value. They want to get a job done. So whatever you can do in order to help them get there, the better.
Is there, speaking of kind of jobs to be done, right? When you think about kind of that token of work that you're going to give to an agent or some task with some agentic freedom, as you said, right? Is there kind of a syntax that you think of? Is this kind of almost like one of the things that I've been kind of wrapping my head around is there's kind of resources I want to access. There's kind of conditions to be met for this thing to happen. There's kind of outputs that I'd like to see. Is that like, tell me a little bit about how do you think about the syntax of this and how is it different than just an if then statement, right?
Yeah, I gotta say, there's a few more. I think you got the nail in the head there, but I think there's even more layers, right? For example, let's say that you have a use case that we see a lot of there is what we call agentic analytics, is when you have a layer of agents sitting up on top of a data lake. So a
Mm-hmm.
data lake or some sort of data storage. And what these agents do is they abstract away all the complexity from that data, meaning that you can ask something in plain English, and these agents they have the ability to not only understand in runtime what are the tables, what are the schemas, what are the data types, but they can write the query, run the queries, fix the queries, and then they can extract the data and take inference from that data, understanding, draw correlations, and plot charts. So you kind of like you have the ability to tap in that data in a way that you wouldn't be able to do before, at least not within a reasonable time frame. So I think when you see things like that is when things like get very impressive, and you say like, all right, now I see the actual power of what I can do with some of these things like this. But that comes with a lot of the questions that you ask. Is not only like the things that you mentioned, but scoping is one that we have been hearing more and more. Like, what happens if Doug like runs this agent, and what kind of level of access Doug has, and therefore what levels of access the agents that Doug's running should have, compared to what if Joe runs the same agents, what kind of level of access like I should have. So I think honestly, especially when you're thinking about enterprises, I think like in terms of the consumer use cases, there's going to be it's going to be a lower entry point. But when you're thinking
Right.
about enterprises, like again, they got burned with these things in the past and they don't want to go there again. So you want to make sure that you're being very protective about your data and you're running this in the most airtight security environment that you can.
Interesting. We're obviously, given the name of this podcast, Revenue Renegades, we're focused a lot on kind of sales use cases. I love the one that you gave around analytics and kind of being able to proactively or even very very in real time kind of answer some complex queries that oftentimes might take a RevOps team days, weeks, to go answer. What are some of the other kind of sales use cases you're seeing come up most often?
Oh, that's a lot. I mean, right now at Career AI, we have around 150 agents working for us. So
Wow.
that's insane, honestly. And I think if it was not that, we would probably need a team that is at least 3 times bigger than what we currently have. And some of these agents, at least the ones in sales, they do a bunch of everything. So first off, they do any meeting prep. So let's say that we're about to jump into a meeting and it's a lot of back to back, so you don't know much about a specific company. These agents go off and research the company, they research the person, they research the industry, latest news. And not only that, because researching is, again, you could do that with traditional automation, but then the right spin on here is because these agents understand our business core AI, they add that on top of everything that they found. So what would be the use cases that these companies would be interested about? How could core AI help these companies? What are kind of the main relationships and their connections? What are similar companies in our databases that we can talk about? So it basically populates like our AEs going into these calls with everything that they need to go from one call into another and jumping into like if they have done like a 3 hour prep
Mhm.
on everything. So that is one of it. But then again, even if they sign up as a lead, we use information like that for target marketing. So, for example, if you, Doug, sign up as a lead and we infer certain kinds of use cases for you in our industry, all your email market now is going to be super targeted around not only you and your persona and your company, but use cases that fit you. And then once that you get into the product, the demos, the templates that you see, the way that we're going to suggest you to use it, so heavily influence about the inference that these models have made about you, your industry, your role, and everything within your company. So it's exciting to see the sales use cases out there.
That's fascinating. Have you built that when you talked about all these agents that you're running internally at Crew AI? Are these ones that you've built yourself or that others have built in some cases that you've leveraged or a mix of the two?
It's a mix, but it's everything internally. So some of them I have built myself. Like the prep for a meeting is one that was near and dear for my heart, just because I had so many back to backs and sometimes I didn't have enough time to prep. So that was one that I could take a good care of. But we have people now on the sales team, especially for the RevOps, that they have built one for NDAs and agreements. Like we have so many NDAs because when you're doing like deals on the enterprise, like NDAs are kind of like it's a lot, right?
Yeah.
And for a company your size, when you're talking with a company that has over 100,000 employees, it's way easier for you to sign their paper than you can like give your paper. What that means is you got to review those NDAs. And if we keep sending them to your lawyers, we're going to be putting a lot of kids through college, but not our own. So the way that we're doing, like someone, actually an SE on our team put together a group of agents to review NDAs automatically. So now, like as NDAs gets by, they run through it. If there's no yellow flags or red flags, we sign them right away. So it's a mix of like cases that I have built myself, but also now we are getting to the habit of everyone in the company are building these agents and getting them to run within the company themselves.
That's a great segue. How technical do people need to be to build agents on the Crew AI system?
I won't lie. I think like in the long term, the idea is not at all, right? I think like especially if you want this to be the immense industry that we believe it can be, we need to make this extremely accessible for everyone within these companies. So long term, we're working towards no code is the only option that you need. But I think it's going to be a lot like e-commerce nowadays. If you want to launch a new e-commerce, like Shopify can help you do it, and it's pretty easy, right? But if you want to do all the extra complexity and the extra payment systems and all that, then you might require an engineer.
Yeah.
Nowadays, what we're seeing is we can either sell into a more central, kind of like a CIO, CDIO kind of persona, or we can sell directly to a business unit. But the companies and the teams that have most success, they have some sort of technical sponsorship. It doesn't need to be like an entire team or anything, but they usually have an engineer or two that will partner with our forward deployed engineers in building those initial use cases while we teach them how to fish.
Got it. And how do you? It's interesting that you talk about the company research bot because I think when Dharmesh has talked about Agent.ai, his company research bot in there is the most popular one I think in that marketplace right now. And I think what they're, he's obviously trying to pitch more of a, you know, mere mortals who are not coders can come in and kind of, put together some pieces and go build things there in that marketplace. How important do you see the kind of marketplace aspect of it, where you can kind of roll your own, being a non-technical person, and maybe shop for lots of agents and categories, being as part of this overall solution?
I think a marketplace will need to exist, right?
Mhm.
I think it's all a matter of timing. Like look back at like custom GPTs back in the day, right?
Mhm.
Like if there was one company that was well positioned to do that, that was OpenAI,
Mhm.
and the thing was a big flop. Like
Yeah.
most people don't necessarily use it right now.
Yeah.
So for me, it's definitely coming. It's just a matter of the right timing with the right audience, and then things will work out. Now, I think Dharmesh is doing a good job. For full disclosure, Dharmesh is one of our biggest angel investors. So I work directly with him. He's an amazing guy. And I think he's trying to do things on the HubSpot way, right? Like Agent AI, his thing feels HubSpot, it smells HubSpot, it has the HubSpot DNA on that. It's
Yeah.
very much like focus on the SMB, focus on the bootstrapper, focusing on the people that want to get it done. So I think there's something special there. That said, I haven't seen marketplaces really take off yet as kind of like the main engine driving adoption. I think there's going to come to that, but I don't think all the preconditions have been met just yet.
Got it. A lot of the what's been discussed in this kind of transition to more an agentic future is how software is priced and what does it mean for kind of replacing labor. I think the things that I've seen so far that are most like the let me charge per outcome have been in the customer service area. So you have folks like Sierra and some of the other customer service players who are either only doing that kind of model or charging in a pick your adventure. You can pay per seat or you can pay in
Yeah.
this way. What do you see as kind of the kind of likely futures for the pricing of these kind of services? And is it right to think of it as I'm replacing labor in some cases, and so I'm going to go spend as if I'm spending a fraction of a customer service rep or an SDR?
Yeah, so the way that I look at this is, honestly, let me preface like this with that it's a new industry. It's a new industry. There's no company that has been doing this for like 20 years.
Yep.
There's just not. So I think everyone's kind of like trying to figure it out. Now, what I think companies are doing is they're focusing on one side of things very well. That is, how do I charge and I bind my price as close to value as I can. And that's the right way to think about it. Now, I think what a lot of these companies are forgetting is on the other side of this business, especially like, again, because Korea is more focused on enterprise. But if you're thinking about how these companies are thinking about their budgets, a lot of the time, charging based on value and an outcome makes very unpredictable to them to do their budgets and planning. So even though you might be thinking that you're very smart because you're like, hey, like you're only paying the value that you're getting, what they're hearing is you don't think enterprise. You don't speak our language. That is not what we operate. It's not how we operate. I would rather pay more. I mean, I have seen companies out there that, unfortunately, I can't name neither the company nor the vendor, but they hired a vendor and they pay them $75 million and they have not used $15 million from that. And they are okay. Like, it was a bad decision and they want to change it and they're working on that. But that was an easier deal to do than a pay as you go or pay as you get value, because that gives you ability to forecast. That gives you ability to put in your reports. And when these companies are doing their 10Ks, their 20Fs, their 8Ks, they need to be able to factor those things in, and uncertainty doesn't sit well with investors.
Yeah, I think the kind of outcome-based pricing lends itself well potentially to customer service kind of outcomes. I've not yet seen somebody or heard anyone who's kind of come up with a good model yet for sales. Have you?
I have not. I mean, I know there's a few people that are trying different things. There are companies that are trying to quote unquote clone existing salespeople within companies, and what would that look like? There's people talking about a revenue share. So there's a little bit of people trying a bunch of different things in here. I think in the end of the day, like even for these companies that are trying, I would say experiment. That's the main thing. Experiment, try the new things.
Yep.
But in the end of the day, make sure that you're giving value. If you're giving value, you get more tries at changing price than most companies believe. If you haven't changed your price in a year, there might be something wrong with your company. I can tell you that. So you're gonna have many stabs at price. You won't get to have that many stabs at kind of like figuring out product market fit and giving value. So I want to say I have been seeing some different things out there, and I appreciate them. But I think I would advise people to put themselves on the shoes of the buyer and what that means for their job as well.
I remember when I did a call with you and Rob Bailey. I think Rob had brought up his calendar, and it was one of these crazy, every 15, 30 minutes stuff is scheduled. Um, how do you balance that, growing as fast as you have, the amount of things that are going on? Obviously, agents are helping there, but when you think about your previous experience, what are some of the key things that you try to keep in mind as a CEO and leader to make sure you're kind of keeping your eye on the prize, and not getting distracted?
Well, I gotta say, I think there's a few the way that we run this company. I think it's very similar to what we would see out there. We very much embrace chaos to some extent. So there's a few kind of like core first principles that we agree as a company, and as long as people can point out back to those principles, they can do whatever they need to. So whatever they need to get the job done, there's not going to be represalies. Like, I'm not going to get back to you and blame you for something. There's not a place for blame, as long as you can point back to one of those core principles. So I think a lot of what we're doing nowadays in the company is, one, understanding what is going to work out in 1 week is not going to work out in the next.
Mm-hmm.
Understanding that as a growing startup now going into a growth stage, the one thing that we have going in our way that bigger companies don't is not only speed, but also big swings. We can take big swings that big companies can't. So you gotta pay with your strengths. Double down on your strengths. If you have things that are falling short, yes, you work on them as a secondary goal, but the main thing is double down on your strengths. That's gonna want to take you like very, very far. So I think a lot of days you're gonna see some crazy things within Career AI where it's business as usual, but then I see a small signal of something, and I say like this is gonna matter because of something. Like I can see how this is gonna play like a role in the 2 or 3 months from now, and I will dive in and sometimes take 2 or 3 people with me, and that's gonna become a whole thing, and eventually that pays out. But I think those are kind of like those are some of the benefits of being a smaller company, and some of the benefits of being a startup, and what allows you to move super fast. So I would encourage others to do the same as well.
Can you share what the Crew AI principles are?
Yeah, I can actually even open them here for you. I know some from top of mind, and there we go. Who we are. So one is we move fast and we are bold. And what I mean here is we take pride on that, and we take pride on taking like bold moves. So no blame. Blame will freeze people up.
Mhm.
Constructive feedback is welcome as long as it comes from a place of love. Everyone in the company knows why we're doing it, how we're doing, and what we're doing. Everyone feels empowered. The other one is we hold no punches. And what I mean by that is I have seen so many companies get into that limbo of like, oh, we're going to launch something new, but let's wait a few days because then we can do this and we can do that. Pardon my French, but F that.
Yeah.
No, we hold no punches. We have something that we like, we put it out there. And then, like, we also foster the community and care. We also communicate very proactively. We embrace ownership and we make quick and bold decisions. Those are some from our internal docs that we show for people once that they join the company.
Got it. Thank you for sharing that.
No worries.
What do you think? Obviously, this is all moving very fast for all of us, right?
Yeah.
What are some of the safeguards you think that need to be put in place, to kind of avoid over dependence or maybe unintended consequences from implementing some of these things?
Yeah, I think honestly, when you're thinking about the governance for the systems in general, there's a few things that you care about. One is on the low level and on the high level. On the low level, we're talking about tracings, prompts, whatever is going on in that area, you want to monitor that.
Hmm.
Then there is a higher level on this, and that is the agentic work. So the quality, the hallucination, what might be happening, the tools that are being used, and all that. On top of that, you might have authentication and scoping that we talked a bunch already. So the what you got access to and how you get access to and fingerprint so you can reproduce it. And then on top of that, I think there's an element of data localization and data privacy. And what I mean by that is sanitizing data before request goes out. So removing PII, personal information, especially for some of our customers in Middle East. Some of this data cannot even leave their premises. Like they need to be in servers that are like 30, 50, 100 meters from their like HQ. So it's insane. Like you can have the data leaving the country. So you got to have a layer of privacy sanitization that we do offer on our enterprise solution. So I think there's a bunch of different layers depending on how high you're going, especially for more highly regulated industries. And in the end of the day, it's funny because some of those challenges are prompting some of these companies to crawl back into on-prem. What I think is incredible. Like a bunch of companies went to the cloud and spent decades into the cloud. And now we are selling Crew AI with HPE, where you have HPE hardware, NVIDIA NIMs, and Crew AI agents in a box. And also with Dell, where you buy Dell hardware with Cloudera, NVIDIA, and Crew AI in the box. So it's funny to see how some of these companies are now crawling back. And I was in a meeting the other day with one of the biggest oil and gas companies in the world, and they're talking about how they have data centers that are like tornado proof. And it's insane. Like it's a separate side of the business that you don't get to see every day.
That's wild. That is crazy to hear. Um, the pace, as I mentioned, of this is crazy. Like, I think I'm not sure Moore's law kind of covers it in terms of kind of the doubling every 18 months. It feels like it's doubling every 18 days. When you kind of pull out your crystal ball, what do you think the world of agents and AI looks like 18, 24 months from now?
Well, 18 months from now, I think we're going to have over 1,000 agents working in Crew AI alone. And we're a small company, right? Compared to like some of this Fortune 500. I believe the more progressive companies out there, they're going to have maybe tens, if not hundreds of thousands of agents working for them. And I think that will create so many efficiency gains that if anything, it's going to foster a lot of innovation. Because that's what we're seeing, right? Like we have we're working with a big CPG company across 3 different countries. The first use case we did with them was one country back then. We're doing this one case. They got into a process that had expensive data scientists involved. They were able to get 80% efficiency gains. Right. What they did, now they have all the people that were doing that working on further automating other processes based on what they learned. So these gains, they really compound. And as you free up the space from those people, it doesn't mean that you fire them, because if anything, you're making more money already because of the efficiency. So what you want to do is you want to actually innovate even further. So I think what we're going to see in the next few years is going to be a trend of automating adoption and innovation as a byproduct of that.
But I think those are great examples. But obviously, if you have rapid efficiencies, you are in some cases going to need less bodies. I mean,
yeah.
Mark has talked about 1,000 less people in customer service because he's handling a lot more stuff in an automated way. I went to a VC discussion the other night with Obvious Ventures, and they were talking about the one-person billion-dollar startup. Which is, I think, a bit of a stretch, but nonetheless, it's not the 10,000 person billion-dollar startup. I don't know how big Crew AI is, but where do you think that that model looks like in the future? Because I would imagine, because you're focused on the enterprise, a lot of these companies are looking at this from a people reduction or a cost savings kind of model.
Yeah, in the end of the day, when you think about where the budget's coming from, definitely people is where when some of this budget's coming from, right? Some of the times not necessarily directly tied to we're going to do layoffs or something, but it might be associated with the fact that we're going to restructure and these people are going to be doing something else, right?
Mhm.
Where like they were doing processes that were honestly subpar to the skills that they have, and they
Mhm.
could be doing more interesting things. So I think that's kind of like what we're seeing even within ourselves, right? For example, if I had people to be reviewing NDAs, I could hire someone from that, and I'm not. Now I have an agent doing what that means. That means that I hire one person less. No, that means that I hire an engineer now, or that means that I hire someone else, like another person to help me with go to market. So I think there's definitely going to be an element where the way that these companies are structured is going to change for
Mhm.
sure. Now, I do think it's going to be a net positive in the end.
Is there something when you're thinking about your own growth, how do you think about uh, making that evaluation of like we're kind of going to red line, we need a person, right, in the next few months, versus I think an agent can take on some or all of that task and we can push that date out, or not even hire that person.
I mean, a lot of the days, like if we have a need, one of the things that we think is one, can we build this as an agent? Then
Hmm.
two, if we cannot, can we hire someone to build this agent for us?
Hmm.
So even like, and then like the final question is, all right, now can we hire the actual person? So
Yeah.
we do think about like maybe hiring like people. So we have, because we have an open source presence, we have quite a community. So we leverage some of that community sometimes to build agents for us because we are at capacity. And then some of these agents happens to kind of like help us to take some of that load for sure.
Got it. Well, this has been a fascinating conversation. I really, I think you are on the leading edge of this whole agentic movement. I think when we first met, I didn't even know what the word agentic meant, and I've come up to speed on this stuff very quickly, and I appreciate you also really helping separate the signal from the noise, because I do think that there's a lot of as you've seen folks claiming everything is AI. I think you've seen folks claim everything is agents. And it's good to understand kind of where that dividing line is and how people are doing stuff. Maybe to wrap up, just a few kind of rapid fire questions for you. When you think about, this doesn't have to be in your professional life, it could be in your personal life. Like if you could wave a magic wand and say, "Oh my God, wish AI could just take over that task forever for me," what would that be?
I gotta say, it's one that I should have done already by now, but I didn't have the time. Is email, email, and all my inboxes in general, like LinkedIn, everything is flooded. So I'd love to have something to help me with that. There's tools for that already, but I would like to build something using Crew myself to do it. So that's going to be one thing that I wish I could. One that I actually have done and I love it is coding. So right now, as soon as someone open a pull request to change something in Crew AI on the code level, what happens is we have an agent kickoff that is going to actually write the code. We have another agent that then reviews it. And then the first agent comes back and implements the reviews. And most of the times we can merge those PRs right away. And that has been amazing. So that was a huge value unlock in itself.
That's amazing. I love that. I
Yeah.
love that story. What's something you're passionate about that might surprise people?
Ooh, something that I'm passionate about that might surprise people. Well, surprise people. Most people would have no clue, but something that I don't think it's mainstream. I like anime. So Japanese anime style. I don't think it's a huge trend. I hope it's not. So it might be something that people wouldn't expect from someone like me to like.
I love it. I love it. I'm Japan is one of my favorite countries to visit, and it's really all parts of that culture are fascinating to me. Um, and then when you think about, again, just kind of digging into your personal routine, what's for you? What's one thing you can't live without in your daily routine?
One thing that I can, my computer. I'm carrying this everywhere, everywhere. Everywhere I go, I have my computer with me, my iPad as well. I was the kind of person that said I would never have an iPad. Like, this is not for me. But the moment that I got it, now I rock this thing up and down, and I love it. I love how I use this. And now that I'm looking at my table here, there's one thing that I acquired 8 years ago that I used a lot, and that is a ErgoDox keyboard.
Oh, interesting.
So
Hmm.
this is a keyboard that is split in half. So you have two halves that you use it, and it's entirely engineered to prevent you from having any kind of like wrist problems. I used to have many of those back in the days from so many hours coding, and now I can't live about without this. These ones are 80 years old. I need to renew them, but they still work like a charm.
I love it. I love it. That's perfect engineer answer as well. And then finally, just how can listeners keep in touch with you and help you on the mission for Crew AI?
Well, I would say check us out in X. So if you go into x.com/JOAOMDMOURA, that's going to be my personal one. We do a lot of building public. What you don't expect for a Series A company closing in to be a Series B company. So it's kind of like a different thing. I do ask questions. I do answer questions. Sometimes I might take a while. But X is a great way to engage with me. Also, LinkedIn under the same handle, JOAOMDMOURA. That would be another way for you to get in touch with me directly. But you can also go into our website and you're going to be introduced to some of the people on our team. And that would be very exciting.
Awesome. Joe, I really appreciate you taking the time. This has been a fascinating conversation, and have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me, Doug. Thank you, everyone. Have an amazing day.